Welcome to the JICA session on tourism crisis management. Today, I expect you to learn through this session about the significance and importance of tourism crisis management. Tourism crisis is triggered by occurrence of the disaster or an incident, or an abrupt change of market environment, and also the reputation that follows the incident. And when these happen, and visitors and tourism businesses are significantly impacted, we call it a tourism crisis. Then how do we manage the tourism crisis? Tourism crisis management is organizational activities that include 1. Identifying the tourism crises that significantly impact the visitors and tourism businesses. Identifying. Then, number 2, implementing countermeasures to prevent and reduce the negative impact of the tourism crises. Number 3, proactively preparing communication, evacuation to ensure the safety of the visitors at the onset of and during the tourism crisis events. Number 4, educating and training the relevant personnel to be ready for the crisis. Number 5, rapidly and appropriately responding to the crisis and the reputation by implementing the plan. And lastly, supporting the business continuity and early recovery of the affected tourism sector. So this is the chart that illustrates tourism crisis management. There are 2 phases before the actual crisis and incident takes place. Then, after the incident, so let's start with the reduction. You can't fully prevent a disaster crisis from occurring, but you can reduce or mitigate the negative impact of the disaster crisis to visitors and tourism businesses. So reduction includes mitigation of the potential risks and also minimizing the impact of the disaster crisis event on tourism sector. Let's skip readiness and go to response phase. Response includes immediately following the onset of the disaster, activate the crisis response team, ensure the safety of the guests and employees, and make measures for post-crisis recovery. Let's talk about what we can do for the safety and comfort of the visitors on the site. And one thing I want you to understand is that only tourism businesses on the service front can immediately respond to the impacted visitors. There are, the plans by the government, local governments, or, municipalities, but those public sector cannot be at the site of the disaster when it occurs. Okay, now let's think about the business continuity of the tourism destinations and tourism businesses when they experience their disasters. After the incident, there will be a downgraded destination image. And when there is a decline of the visitors to that destination, the tourism businesses experience a challenge, big challenge. Employment of the tourism workforce is at risk. And the impact is not only limited to what we call tourism businesses, but also to the business partners of the tourism sectors. Now, in order to respond promptly and appropriately, we need to be prepared, well prepared. When I talk about the readiness, I always use the word proactively. Prepare response before a crisis strikes. Proactive decision making. It enables immediate activation of the crisis response team, appropriate response, even if they're the leaders are not present on site, and consistent decision-making, regardless of who is in charge. And lastly, recovery. Recovery means returning to the organization to normal after a crisis, and have visitors returning to a crisis-affected destination as quickly as possible. And when you think about the recovery of the damaged infrastructure, always think about build back better. So it means when recovering, rehabilitating the damaged infrastructure, try not to rebuild how it was before the crisis, but recover it to be more resilient and sustainable. Before I end this session, there's one thing I want to share with you. That is a word by disaster prevention director who was in charge of the disaster response when there is a major earthquake and tsunami in Japan in 2011. The citizens, they did what they were trained to do, and they could only do what they were trained to do and drilled. Thank you for joining me for this session.